everyone. My name is Ben Eady, and I'm the Online Media Manager of ModernAnalyst.com, the premier online community for business analysts. I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar titled Collaborative Requirements for BAs, Keeping Your Future Projects on Track. Today's featured speakers are Will French and Ashley Len from Cya Software, and the webinar will last approximately 60 minutes, including the Q&A session. So make sure to submit your questions in advance using the questions feature of the webinar software. I'd also like to say thank you to Cya Software for sponsoring this event. And at this time, I'll turn it over to Will to get us started.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Let's go ahead and jump in. Just as far as an introduction, I am a senior solutions architect and actually help lead the solutions architect team here at Cya Software. I have a technical background in software engineering and have worked in previous enterprise social collaboration companies. In my day-to-day, I work to understand the landscape of Cya's enterprise customers, which really leads to eliciting the details of their current processes, their challenges, and most often their desires for a future process when it comes to requirements management and product delivery. While working at Cya, I've seen and heard firsthand how collaboration is happening today on complex projects and product development teams, and how teams are all striving to improve the way they keep all relevant parties up to speed and involved. So I'm excited to be here talking with you all today and share what I've seen and learned, and also share my views on how teams can work to better collaborate by improving the way that they work together and communicate on their projects. So let's get started. As far as an agenda, these are the four main areas that I'll be covering, and as mentioned, a Q&A towards the end of the session today. I'll be covering the personas that I see that we work with in our day-to-day when we're talking about collaboration. I'll then go through the types of collaboration that happen, just to bring light to a lot of the conversations that we may take for granted, and then share some of the challenges that happen when we are engaging in those conversations with those folks that are in what I call our collaboration circle. And then finally, I'll share some insight into to what I've seen on why we should strive to make collaboration better. We know that a lot of you are working through collaboration and communication on your project teams today. So why should we improve, or why should we spend the time to make that a little bit better? So this first section is the personas that are in the collaboration circle. And I'm actually going to start off this webinar with a poll and who you see in your collaboration circle before I introduce my lens into this view. So we'll go ahead and start up this poll, and I want you to select all the folks that are in your collaboration circle. These could be your team members, managers and executives, internal stakeholders, external customers, downstream consumers. Just want to get an idea of who you feel is in your day-to-day collaboration circle. So we'll leave this up here for just a few seconds, and then I'll share the results. All right. From the looks of it, most folks are viewing their team as the number one, as well as the internal stakeholders as the number 1 and 2 folks that they are collaborating with on their projects. External customers, it seems like a few of you are viewing those as important in your circles. And the least amount, which I often see, is that downstream consumers are not as involved in the collaboration that we have on our projects. So, you know, the internal stakeholders here is pretty large, and they will be a large focus of what I'm talking about today. So that's great. Thanks for your input, everyone. So who do I see in the collaboration circle? It is those folks. And I want to talk through my view of who they are. This particular graphic just shows us in the center, the business analyst, the product owner, the business systems analysts, even system engineers working in the center here. And around the circle, as it were, we have those various groups of folks that are in that collaboration circle. The first one that I want to talk through are the team members. Right here, these are the folks that are within your organization that you work with on your projects. They could be your project manager peers, could be your fellow business analysts, other product owners, and oftentimes we're asking them for input on the requirements. Right? These are the folks that we work with day to day, not necessarily the folks we're listing the requirements from, but those that are on our team that we may ask if they've seen this project before, or if they've worked with this development team before, to give us some insight and work with us on maybe refining the requirements that we have. This next group, and while they're still on your team, if you will, and they're still in your organization, managers and executives are oftentimes engaging in different types of conversations. They may be asking for the status of the project as opposed to the day-to-day details of what's happening or what's maybe from what's been happening before. And we should recognize that managers and executives that are working with you to deliver your projects have a unique communication style and unique communication needs. We should recognize that the right level of detail is going to be important when we're working with this type of persona. Oftentimes they are inserting themselves into the conversation as opposed to being throughout the project life cycle. So we should be aware and should understand how to react when they do insert themselves into those conversations. And in addition, we should make it easy to respond when working with these folks in the various conversations that we have with them, whether it's asking for approval, asking them to review the requirements to provide their input, or giving us some direction. Making it easy for them to respond is going to increase the rate or the success rate that we have of getting the feedback in a timely manner from this particular persona. The next group are the stakeholders or the customers, the folks that we are often defining the requirements for. And the two types here, the distinction that I have is that on the internal side, most often we're calling them stakeholders. And managers and executives may sometimes be lumped into that group. But the stakeholders that I often see are, let's say, for the IT teams and the internal app development teams. Those are your application users, the folks that we are eliciting the requirements directly from. Inside of that internal stakeholders group, there's even often two groups that I hear that folks are working with. There are some of those folks from the stakeholder perspective that just want you to make things better without giving us much insight into how we can make things better. And then there's the other group within that internal stakeholders bucket that are providing us insightful information on how we can make their lives easier. They've thought about the use cases or the scenarios that would improve their lives, make them faster, make their jobs easier, etc. So not only are we tasked with eliciting the requirements from a group of people, but we also need to be aware of the different styles and the different skill levels that we are working with in that group as well. The second group from the external side, oftentimes they're called customers. We also, I work with teams that call their business units or business groups within their own organization their customers as well, and they can be viewed in both ways. From the external side, however, this could be maybe one of three. A customer advisory board. This is a subset of your specific customer or target customer base that you may be gaining insight from, showing off new product or new functionality. Additionally, there may be a one-off customer in a B2B environment where you're building something specific for them. So they're paying you for specific features and functionality. And working with them as opposed to a customer advisory board is a little bit different. We need to be more responsive and more in tune with their specific needs since we are delivering a one-off product for them specifically. And the last type of customer really is the general customer. You've probably heard that that some people think that we're in the age of the customer, the age of customer feedback, because there's so many feedback channels that we can get as we produce something that is in the consumer world, whether it's Twitter or Facebook or using customer communities. There's no shortage of ways that folks want to provide their feedback to us on the product side. So that group is going to be a large part of the conversations that we have inside of this collaboration circle. And this last group, the group I call downstream consumers, I want to make a distinction that by consumers, I don't mean those folks that are going to Best Buy or to Home Depot to purchase your product, but rather the consumers of the requirements that we are documenting. These could be, your development teams, of course, your quality assurance teams that are using the requirements to develop their testing plans. Other times it's offshore development teams or off-site dev teams. I feel including them can improve the way that we are delivering on our projects. And these two downstream consumer groups, the two that I see most often, the development subject matter experts or engineering SMEs and the quality assurance teams, think differently. While they are downstream consumers, I feel that they think differently, and we should use that to our advantage. And what I mean by that is the engineering team is often tasked with building what it is you paint a picture of with words and mock-ups and requirements. They may be giving us feedback on, is it technically feasible? Is this something that's been done before? Is this realistic? Oftentimes we're asking them for their opinion rather than their approval on the requirements. And we're getting them to understand why it is we're developing this product to give them some insight that can help them make better decisions down the road. Now on the quality assurance side or the verification side of the house, they're thinking, how can I test this? I was talking with one of our product managers and co-founder, Derwin Harris, the other day, and we coined the term the what about. And the quality assurance team often thinks in this what about scenario world. And I see them not looped in early enough, and if we're able to tap into that what about scenario, we can actually improve the way that we're defining the requirements so that we have less hiccups down the road. Let's take a simple example where we're giving the engineering team a story or a feature that says we need a username box and we need a date field. The engineer is just simply thinking, well, how can I build a field for a username, and how can I build a field for a date? Fairly simple. The quality assurance team, though, is thinking, well, what about a username that is 30 characters long? What about a username that's 1 character long? What about a date field that's in the past? Or what about a date that's in the future? Or a date that's formed, let's say, in the European standard as opposed to the American or the Western standard for entering a date? And the quality assurance team is able to weed out some of those things that maybe our developers would have to make an assumption on later in the process. So involving these downstream consumers earlier on in the process is going to help our requirements definition and refinement phase be a little bit more streamlined so that when the developers are tasked with the requirements, they have a little bit more detail so that our quality assurance team isn't finding those edge cases and defects and causing rework. So within this collaboration circle, we may work in different phases, of course, and I'll talk through the phases that I see in just a little bit. But having simple conversations and pulling a couple of folks into a meeting is something that can be done fairly easily without too much work. You guys are doing that today. But when those conversations start becoming more complex and we're involving more folks in our collaboration circle, and projects that we're working on are getting bigger, they're going across multiple systems, multiple applications, multiple product lines that we may be having, those conversations can get complex. And we're involving more folks that need to stay up to date, that need to be included in that conversation. So some of the types of collaboration that I see, the first one is elicitation and definition. All right, this is with the stakeholders and those customers that we have on the internal, again, those end users of the system or the application, and we're making their lives easier. But first, we need to document the requirements so that we can ensure that the changes or the updates or the new application that we're building is going to be the correct one. On the customer side, we may be eliciting feature requests or paid enhancement projects, or we're eliciting requirements from the market. This is taking place through meetings, through interviews, through team meetings, user observation, among other channels. And of course, we're storing this information somewhere as well, and I'll talk about that later. In this phase, this elicitation and definition, we, at the center of the collaboration circle, are usually in control. And it's usually the easiest time that's set up for collaboration. Since we're just learning on both sides of the fence, there's not a whole lot at stake for ensuring that we get things right. We're just starting out this phase. And this is when collaboration feels most natural, right? We're eliciting those requirements. We're learning from those folks that we want to document the requirements from. Now, after we've elicited some or all of the requirements, depending on how we are working through our project, we need to document them in some way, whether it's Word, Excel, a requirements management tool. No matter which tool or tools you're using to document those requirements, this next step is about ensuring that what you've heard is what was documented, and what you've documented is actually what they meant. So with our stakeholders, this confirmation is really answering the question, did I hear you correctly? In the elicitation phase, there may be lots of head nodding. Humans in general have a tendency to do that. I'm sure you've been in conversations where you're walking through a scenario, or you're eliciting requirements, or you're asking questions, and we're getting a lot of head nodding. Things sound good. But until we ask them and push them to tell us, yes, that's correct, we can't really know for sure. The approval portion may be a more refined or a more formal way to get approval on the requirements. This is really a way to say that both parties agree that what's been documented is correct to the best of our shared understanding. And text and mock-ups and diagrams, etc., can only get us so far. So I think some of the later phases will, again, continue to refine how we are ensuring that we are building the right product or the right enhancements. But this confirmation and approval phase is where that collaboration, that almost confrontation to say, is this what you meant? Did I capture this correctly? Needs to be ironed out. The next type of collaboration that happens, and from the poll that we looked at earlier, this isn't happening as much across the board, is that downstream collaboration with those folks. And this downstream collaboration, I feel, needs to be earlier on in our cycle. So not development. I recognize that we are going to have to hand the requirements to our developers, perhaps walk them through the features and functionality that's going to be defined. But if we're able to move a little bit slower and try to weed out all the possible issues that can be thought of before we start that development, this can allow us to eliminate costly changes and rework and costly assumptions that happen later on in this process. And not all development is involved in this particular process, but subject matter experts, development leads that can help us out. And you should recognize that this type of collaboration, it probably doesn't happen because it's difficult. The requirements may be half-baked. The development team is busy, of course. We have to find a way to convince them that it's worth it, and I feel that it is. By having this downstream collaboration happen during the requirements, let's say approval or confirmation phase, it helps us set upstream expectations for time and complexity before we get too far down the road and start promising things that we can't deliver on. And like I said, we also have the handoff of the requirements, but that's not something that I'm focusing on at this point. The next type of collaboration is around change and enhancement requests. As we're working through our projects and we've documented the requirements, we've gotten some feedback, we've got our marching orders, and we're moving along through the development phases or the various sprints that we may be working through. And this point in time is everyone feels good in what we're working on and what we're doing. But then something has happened, something we weren't expecting to happen. This change and this change process and this collaboration that needs to occur to say, do we need to shift gears? Do we need more resources? Do we need to cut out this feature? Do we need to add a new feature? This collaboration that happens becomes more natural if we've developed good communication up until this point. Because we may need to involve our stakeholders or customers, our management team, our development team, our quality assurance team. A lot of the teams that we work with as we sit in the center need to be involved to work through these change requests so that we don't get the dreaded scope creep that often happens. Some examples of unexpected events that cause this type of necessary collaboration that I see, that maybe the workflow for your team that's using this particular system has changed or is being modified, meaning we need to shift the way that the requirements reflect that. Perhaps there are internal politics or resource shifts that either cause us to have less development resources to deliver on a specific date, or maybe we have more, and now we can reprioritize the things that we want to get done given that we have more resources. Other times there are new stakeholder groups or new customer groups that are added in that weren't originally a part of the requirements elicitation process. We may need to pause to see if we can meet their needs as well without modifying or changing the development schedule that we've already set out and are marching towards. On the product side or external customer side, there may be new products on the market that cause us to pause and reflect and say, that feature that we had deprioritized earlier is now table stakes for the other couple of products that are in our product family or in our market, and we need to react to that. We need to adjust what we are going to focus on, given that something has changed that was outside of our control. So like I said, this is necessary collaboration, but it's difficult since we have so many folks involved. We have decisions that need to be made. We have impact analysis that needs to be run. etc. And this is something that, that we should be focusing on. And the next type of collaboration that I see, and this is the last one that I'll talk through today, this validation phase is not testing, but rather stakeholder validation. Post-development cycle, post-sprint cycle for the validating of the requirements with your stakeholders and with your customers. Some examples of ways to validate those requirements is a presentation to the customer advisory board, or maybe we're getting that product to market. Or on the internal side, most often, and something that we see here at JAMA and the customers that we work with, is those sprint demos, right? The getting the validation that, yeah, that is on track. That does meet our needs, at least as we understand it. So don't think about validation simply as testing. Could we log in? Did this button click get us to where we needed to go? But rather, does your stakeholder feel that what's been delivered or what's been developed meets the requirements? And as we move more and more agile, these iterations of validation become more and more important. Because with that confirmation and approval phase that I talked about earlier, it was with mock-ups and text-based requirements. What this validation phase should be about is the real working environment that we have and getting that validation that, yes, that meets our needs. So we have a lot of conversations that happen at various phases of our product delivery and of our requirements process. And if we move more and more agile, these conversations are happening over and over, and our teams are getting tighter. But as I mentioned, our teams are also getting more complex. We have more folks that are involved in these conversations that are happening more often. And that's one of the things that I feel that we should work to improve, and why we should strive to make collaboration a little bit better. So with the personas defined, with the types of communication and collaboration that are defined, I want to talk through the challenges that I see our customers and folks in similar roles having with the collaboration that's out there. So these are two parts. I've got one where I'm going to introduce the challenge, and the second to offer some advice and some perspective on how I see teams that are improving or changing the way that they're working. This first one is titled the 11th Hour Swoop-In. On the left-hand side, we may have an executive or a key stakeholder that at that 11th hour is asking us to change or to make a modification, or they're finally making that decision. And we're on the right-hand side as we continue to march towards the delivery date. So let's take that example of the executive, right? The executive often may be aware of your project or the product that you're working on. They have an understanding of what you're trying to deliver. But oftentimes they're too busy to read into that full context. They also may not easily have a way to self-service and get the information at their fingertips when they need it. So they're waiting until that 11th hour. And this challenge, the most frustrating thing that we see is that they're coming to us and giving us advice or making a decision on a particular process or feature that we have. And oftentimes we've already made that decision. So we needed their input earlier on, and now they're coming to us with that critical information that we could have used 2 weeks ago. That's where a lot of this frustration comes in, and this challenge is often seen. So what are some ways that we can work around this particular challenge? I touched on it earlier, but the right level of detail for the executives can be important. This also works for key stakeholders as well. And what I mean by this is giving them the right level of detail, which is not too much information, right? Sending them a document and telling them to go to page 16 to review one of the requirements or give us their input on something. They're going to wait to do that until they have more time. Documents can often be viewed as a time suck for those folks that are receiving it. But if we're able to contextualize that conversation, send them just the snippet of requirements that we want them to review, we have a better chance of getting their feedback in a timely manner. We should also improve and recognize that the methods of collaboration with these personas can be changed as well. Being able to reply simply from email to a contextual conversation or a comment that's happening directly on the requirements is an easy way to make that happen. Additionally, if we're able to let them reply and respond on their own time, where we're not having to call a meeting, that can improve the ways that we are getting the feedback from these personas. And also, the last bullet there is on our side, we should have a way to track our decisions or our open decisions in a central manner so that we know which things we need to follow up on. Oftentimes, let's say Friday before we head out for the weekend, we're sending out that email to say, oh man, I need to get this, this approval or this feedback from an executive. And then next week, come Wednesday, we forgot that, that we had asked that. If we're able to track those open decisions that we have on our side, we're able to proactively follow up and ensure that, well, if they're not able to give us our feedback, is there someone else in this collaboration circle that can help us out? So something on our end that we can do. This particular challenge, I feel like we should work to eliminate as opposed to react to. This next challenge is titled the missing vault. On the left-hand side, we may have our stakeholders or our subject matter experts. On the right-hand side is an analyst just stating here are the requirements as far as we know it, and maybe we're asking them for their input. The challenge or the situations that this comes up in is whether someone leaves for, let's say, maternity or paternity, or they're taking a vacation, they've moved to another project, or they've left the company for one reason or another. And that particular person or persons that may have moved or changed their role were someone that we were relying on. They were involved earlier on in the process during the requirements gathering, perhaps. And then later on, when a change or enhancement request comes along, we try to reach out to that same subject matter expert that we used earlier, and they're no longer there. So that missing vault of information is what's being characterized here. And it can be a real challenge today to find out who to go to next without wasting someone else's time or spinning your own wheels as we go through, that email chain of, well, I'm not sure, let's add Jane. Oh, I'm not sure, let's add Steve. It can be difficult to work through that and frustrating at the same time. One of our customers I was talking with actually categorized this problem as the ghost problem. So we knew someone that used to be there, but now they're gone. They're no longer responding. So they're like a ghost. So I thought that was an interesting way to portray this particular challenge. So what are some ways that we can combat this particular challenge of the missing vault? The first one here is document who's involved in the project. And when I first wrote this, I thought adding another document to our process, that's not something that anyone's going to want to take as advice. But with modern requirements management tools that are out there, this documentation of who's involved becomes much more organic and a part of the process. The second bullet kind of helps address that, right? Knowing who's making the edits, who's making the comments, who's been on the reviews, who's authored those requirements. That documentation can be organic, and being able to leverage a solution that knows who's made edits to this requirement, who's made edits or modifications to related requirements, who else was involved in the same review that subject matter expert was involved in as well, can help easily point us to the person we now need to turn to for that advice. And the last way to combat this is don't let those decisions and conversations and questions and answers be locked away in email or someone's head. We can still have those conversations facilitated through email, but storing them in a central location, so being able to reply to notifications as opposed to replying just to emails, can give us a way to store those conversations in a central manner. All the conversations that were happening over email can be replaced by using online and collaborative solutions to do that. And that gives us a central place to then filter and search for those conversations, find out who else was involved, and pull people in to get their opinion or their feedback. This next challenge is decision recollection disorder, which is a fun one. It's something that I run into even as I'm not delivering on projects here. But of all the projects that we work on, all the products that we're trying to deliver and get out to market and out to our customer base, there are hundreds of decisions that get made throughout this life cycle of product delivery, of project delivery. And when you have smaller projects, it's easy to remember, what we did, what we did last week. But as we start involving and start involving larger groups of folks, start working on larger projects, 100 people having all of those conversations and decisions that are made throughout that life cycle is a difficult thing to do. So the personas here are us at the center, and all of the decisions that are being made, whether it's by us or our managers or our stakeholders or our customers, even decisions made from our development team addressing how we're going to solve one of the particular features or challenges that our customers have. And the challenge here is that we don't remember, right, when a conversation that we had a couple months ago on what exactly were we going to do with this? Why was this particular requirement deprioritized? What was that conversation, or who was involved in that conversation? So it can be a challenge, given that we have so many means of communication today, and they're not all centralized. So I have another poll just to ask and just to see how you guys are managing that today, and if you're struggling with that at all. So if you've ever searched your email inbox for a specific conversation, think back on one of the recent scenarios that's been in, and let me know, were you able to find that particular conversation so that you could back up and know exactly why that decision was made? So yes, I was able to easily find that conversation. Yeah, I was able to find it, but not all that easily. No, but I know that the conversation happened, and that's one that's difficult for me. Or no, maybe that conversation wasn't an email. Let me try searching somewhere else. And the last one, I don't often search my email for past conversations. All right, and it looks like well over half, almost 80% of folks, 80+%, are either able to find the conversation or easily, or find it but not all that easily. So this is definitely something that's happening in your day-to-day lives. The lower results, no, the conversation happened, or no, maybe it wasn't an email, not often searching my email. I think that's a little bit of what I expected. I may have expected to see more, but for folks that couldn't find it. So it seems like we can find those conversations, and it's likely because our email inboxes are pretty large, and we can eventually find it. But given that 56%, over half of folks are not able to find it easily, it seems like there's a way to, or an opportunity to improve the way that we are working through those conversations, being able to find them quickly. So thanks for your input. Appreciate it. So this decision recollection disorder, what are some ways that I feel that we can improve it? I think email, given that it's been around for 20, 30, I don't know how exactly long it's been around, but it's been around for so long, and it was developed so earlier on that it's not great at searching and finding existing conversations that have happened. And especially since we use our email not only for our project collaboration, but our team collaboration, our customer collaboration. So there's a lot of conversations that are happening in there that may not be directly related to actually delivering on our projects. And so that can muddy the waters when it comes to then searching to find that decision that was made, or that input that we had requested that we were trying to review and look for. So having a central and consistent method for capturing that information that's related to your project gives you one place to go to search. It doesn't have conversations that are outside of the context of project delivery or product delivery. In the same vein, those stakeholders that may be asking us, so why did we make that change, or what were the decisions that I've made recently? The stakeholders should have a place to review their decisions as well. So again, moving to a central location and a shared collaborative location can help us improve the way that we are looking for decisions and reviewing what we've decided in the past. And so the top two bullets are for the folks that are involved in those conversations. But if we're able to move those conversations out of siloed email and into a central location for consistent collaboration, our developers, our downstream consumers, including the quality assurance team, can benefit too. They now understand why something was perhaps deprioritized because of a specific request from a stakeholder. Same thing goes if something is prioritized, or if the reason that a button or a screen looks a certain way or interacts a certain way, the conversation that led to that requirement being that way can be helpful. The developers don't have to make assumptions on how something should work, but instead they understand the specific need or the conversation that led to the requirement's current state. The next challenge is similar in the nature that we want to look back on the decisions that have been made, but the Cya syndrome, on the left-hand side, we may have more of an executive focus. On the right-hand side, this is us in the analyst role, the product owner role. providing some proof on why we might be working on something or why something's prioritized. So while it's still a decision recollection, oftentimes this particular challenge is more confrontational. And this challenge here is that we remember, why we're working on something. We've got our marching orders from a couple months ago, and then someone is coming in and saying, all right, why are we working on that? Or why didn't we prioritize this particular requirement? And at that point, we now have to run a little bit of a fire drill to then find why we're working on something and why we happen to be doing that particular piece of work. If we, again, have a way to move those conversations into a central location, including the reviews and having those in connection with the requirements, it makes it really easy to shift from the current state of the requirements to who reviewed, who signed off, what those questions or objections or prioritizations were during that particular process. And if we are, as I've mentioned, moving our conversation centrally, being able to filter and to find the answer so that we can CYA in this particular case, it just short circuits that work that needs to be done. So we're not spinning our wheels for as long. You don't have to rehash the same decision over again because we weren't able to find it. So being able to filter and quickly find why we're working on something or the answer to that confrontational conversation that's been brought up helps us eliminate or work through this particular challenge. The next one, I'm bridging the development gap. This one seems fairly straightforward. On the left-hand side, we've got our stakeholders. The right-hand side, the engineering or downstream consumer side. And we're translating what our stakeholders and customers want, and of course, what our development team is going to build. And the challenge here is that we've got to do that in some way that both sides are held accountable and that we are in alignment on that. So how can we work through this particular challenge? I think allowing developers to review the requirements before they're actually tasked with the development work can be a huge plus. In addition to just providing them access to review the requirements, to see them, providing access to the higher level requirements and conversations that have led us to why we're developing those requirements or why this product should be the way that we've defined it can be extremely helpful. And whether we are providing them access to the conversations that have been happening or simply things that are upstream of the user story or functional requirement level, gives them a better picture so that when they're developing the solution and we're letting them be creative in figuring out exactly the best way to develop something, they have an understanding of why it is we are going to be building it. So that development understanding gap is giving them a little bit higher level view, that 10,000-foot view of the solution that we want. And like I mentioned earlier, we've got to convince them that it's worth it. And I feel, and from the customers that I've talked to, they feel that by providing this level of insight into the developers, it gives us better results at the end of the day. So that's why I do feel that being able to convince them is something that we can do. The inability to change or manage change effectively with stakeholders is something that we often run into, mainly because we're working in a document, we're storing that document somewhere that's inaccessible to our stakeholders, or when they want to review something, it's locked away, or they have to look through a 60-page document. So from their perspective in the upper left, they haven't heard of any changes, everything seems on track, but we on the project side are making modifications and updates and changes that sometimes it's difficult to alert those stakeholders or let them know. And that'll lead into the next challenge as well. So we should be consistent in the way that we're providing updates to our stakeholders. They should know what to expect from us when we are making changes or modifications. And our stakeholders and downstream consumers should know how to voice their feedback and receive updates. Again, they should be aware of how we operate as a team. So if they don't see anything, they should be in an understanding that nothing has changed. But if they do want to understand the modifications and the changes and the shifts and the tilts that we're making on the project side, they should have a way to look at that. And in addition, when we do provide them those updates and those changes that we're going to make, providing context into why we're making that change, what changes we're making, and that delta information in an easy, consumable way can really help us with that change and collaboration that we have. And this last challenge, again, if we haven't been working through those changes effectively and we're not involving our stakeholders during that validation phase where we are talking with them and showing them the product that we are currently developing, we may have our stakeholders on the left that are thinking that they're going to get one thing, and us on the project or product delivery side giving them another thing. This challenge, is a really important one in keeping their expectations set correctly throughout all of the changes, those shifts, those decisions that we make through our product delivery life cycle. So what are some ways that we can combat this particular challenge? Improving the way that we collaborate is core and central to this. Elicitation, approval, validation, change management, all of those processes that I've talked through can help us match the expectations of our stakeholders in a better way. Again, being able to share those important decisions and changes that we make, as opposed to batching them up and showing them all the changes we've made in the last month, let's let those trickle through as they come up so we can keep them abreast of the major changes that we are working through. And in addition, recognizing that as our world is shifting a little bit more to self-service, given that we have online and central places to store and access the requirements data that's out there, providing access to the progress information, the requirements details, and the information, obviously maybe in a read-only way for our stakeholders. There are some of those stakeholders that really can be proactive and can work with us and for us even to share the information that they may have learned with the rest of the stakeholders. So we have a lot of conversations and challenges that come up with improving or just gathering all of that feedback. With all these conversations and these various groups, it may seem pretty evident that improving the way that we collaborate is definitely something that can be focused on to tighten the screw, if you will, on improving the way that we are delivering on our projects. A few things from my perspective on why we should strive to make collaboration a little bit better in a little bit more concrete ways. I think there are three things that our landscape or our environment is working towards, and it's happening today. So these top three challenges around complexity, speed, and alignment are the things that we see that are happening with our customers, and why collaboration can help improve all three of these. If we talk about the first one with complexity, both in the people that are involved, this is an example of a study that was done last year, 4 teams, 6 people, 100 products in a large enterprise environment. This leads to a lot of people that are involved in product delivery. And that 100 products could be different applications. It could be different systems that are in play. It could be different versions of those systems, right? That matrix of people, teams, and products or applications that are there can lead to a lot of folks working on different projects and different products that are out there that are all commingled, and the conversations can be shared. We can benefit by improving or decreasing the complexity of having those conversations across our projects. The second way, that we should, or the second reason why we should improve collaboration is really around the speed and being able to deliver things faster. We can get through those review cycles quicker. We can get through to our stakeholders and our subject matter experts quickly. We can get answers to our questions more quickly if we're able to work on and really focus on this area of project delivery. At a large semiconductor company of ours, what used to take 3 people 6 months to get through reviews and approvals in combination with documenting the requirements was drastically reduced after they started working through JAMA. And they focused on 3 core areas: reuse, collaboration, as well as traceability to empower people to make decisions in a quicker manner. And now it takes that same one person, or that same task, one person, 1 month to accomplish, reducing the review cycles, being able to leverage existing requirements that were already reviewed, help them shrink those review cycles. And having that central source of truth allows those decisions that need to be made in context much quicker as well. And the final reason that I'll share is alignment. Again, as we increase the amount of folks that are working on our projects and the different systems and applications that are on our projects as well, keeping teams aligned is a difficult thing to do. As an example, just here at JAMA, over the past couple of weeks, we've captured 14 product decisions that involved 17 different folks to comment on to resolve. And if you project that over the course of a year, that's 350 or 400 different decisions that would otherwise be lost in meetings or email, a couple weeks after they've happened. And this is just a small example of a 150-person company with a single product and the volume of decisions that we track in JAMA to stay aligned. Now imagine a larger organization, a 10,000-employee enterprise with 100-plus products, right? And now we start to introduce a remote workforce. All of those decisions that get made or relayed or rehashed can lead us adrift from where we want to go, from what we originally set out to do. And that just happens naturally because of the lack of centralized communication and central focus from the team that we are working through. So we can be more aligned. We can ensure that the decisions that we've made can be easily revisited so that we can understand who else was involved in those conversations and not have to, again, make assumptions or try to remember exactly what happened. Rather, we can look very specifically at the decision that was made, understand the why, and move forward from there. So we can push forward, we can stay closer to the core business value we want to deliver, and this alignment becomes important, and this alignment is really all about that collaboration. So these challenges, we can manage complexity in our environments by aligning collaboration. We can increase the speed by ensuring that requirements reviews are done in a quicker manner. And of course, gaining alignment and ensuring that that alignment stays core throughout can be improved by improving the way that we are collaborating, being able to rehash or review those decisions in a much quicker and simpler way. So I've got just a couple of things to show from the JAMA product side. I'll open it up for questions, and then I'll let you guys get on to the rest of your day. So just a few things in the way that JAMA focuses on the collaboration within our particular product. This first one here, if we look at this screen, this is an example business requirement, and we've got the comments or collaboration stream open down below. A few things worth noting in this contextual conversation that we've got. The first one, of course, is at mentions, being able to easily pull folks into conversations, shoot them emails directly from this, allowing them to reply directly from their email, again, speaking to that executive method of feedback that we have. Structured conversations allows us to ask for decisions, to raise questions, to put out issues that are there. In addition to social tagging, being able to group conversations together, whether it's by requirements, by topic, or by team. As we do make that contextual conversation and that purposeful collaboration that we have here, this is an example where we have a request for a decision to be made, and it's made in context of the requirements. So this is a decision that's being made, and now we are able to have that decision be on record, if you will. And it's highlighting exactly what that decision was, who was involved, and here in this case, Colleen's now aware of this particular conversation. So if we need to revisit this particular issue or this requirement in a couple of months to understand why we did this particular feature in this way, we know exactly who was involved, we know when that conversation took place, and we know which requirements were associated with it. In addition, these conversations are happening while we're out of the office, while our stakeholders are in meetings, while our executives are away from their desk. They can review the description of these requirements right from their mobile device. Of course, they can do the same things they could on the desktop version by being able to @mention and pull folks in right into the conversation. This gives us a very simple way to engage and move through those requirements, questions that we have, or issues that are raised, no matter where those folks are working. And again, that same way to be able to make those decisions via mobile is, of course, available. When we look at all of the conversations we have, and now we need to look back and say, okay, why did we make this decision? Or we need to search what used to be our email inbox, but now we're searching the conversations that are related just to our project. We may be wanting to understand all of the open decisions that are made, who involves specific folks, so we can easily get down to those conversations and really filter to find the information that's most important. And at the project level, we're viewing all of the conversations that are happening across our project, and we may add the decision filter. So this allows us to see all of the specific decisions that we have logged, whether they were from an in-person meeting that we then came back to log directly in the project, or they were decisions that were made by our stakeholders or executives while they were working through email or logging in via the mobile app. So those are some ways that JAMA allows us to improve the way we're collaborating and take those conversations out of the 20, 30, 40-year-old email system and into a more collaborative, a more inventive solution for ensuring that you can move faster while you're collaborating on your project. So at this point, I'll pause for some questions and answers. We've got just about 8 or 9 minutes left. And thanks, everyone, for listening so far. So Ashley, do we have any questions that I can help answer today?
Hi, Will. Can you hear me okay?
I can, yep.
Great. We did have a couple of questions come in that we can ask. I did just want to point out on this questions and answer slide that you can try JAMA at the jamasoftware.com/try-it if you're interested in a trial. We did have a couple of questions come in about the tool itself. So you can go there and request a trial, and we can help you out however you need. But the first question that we had come in, actually there was a couple of people that asked about this, but it's about having a central and consistent methodology for capturing ideas. I mean, one person asked about it in regards to decision recollection disorder and a couple of other challenges where you recommended a tool or methodology to kind of house this information. Do you want to expand a little bit on that? I know you can talk a little bit about our product in particular, but.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, again, the core there is that when you're working through email, it's often jumbled with other things that are not related to the requirements. And so being able to search or to recall what you're waiting for is something that's difficult to do. So JAMA, other solutions that are working to improve the way that you collaborate on your projects, is definitely a recommendation, right? Even tools outside of the requirement space, things like Jive or Yammer, things that are aimed to improve and focus where that collaboration is happening, is definitely going to help. And using JAMA to track those conversations in context, directly with the requirements that we are asking about, gives you a central place to go, so that if you have, if you're wondering what conversations were made or what was that conversation that I had with Becky, a couple months ago on this requirement or these requirements, it gives you a place to go that's in connection to the requirements themselves, as opposed to having to go to 1, 2, 3, 4 other sources to look for where that conversation may have happened.
So we had a question come in about collaborating with the right stakeholders to elicit requirements and otherwise. Do you have any best practices on making sure that you're talking to the correct people? Do you have what's your experience and opinion for overcoming this challenge?
Sure. Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, oftentimes our stakeholders, or when we are tasked with a project, it's our job to just try and find who those stakeholders are going to be. Oftentimes, our first couple of stakeholders that we start working with or interviewing or eliciting from can help us further discover who else should be included. One of the things that I feel is important, and it happens in email today with CCs or reply alls and additions, but the same thing could happen in your requirements review sessions or your collaborative questions that are happening in a tool like JAMA, is allowing those folks to invite their peers or the folks that they feel would be most important. Oftentimes I hear something like, oh, well, we should include Jim on this because he's the expert at X, Y, and Z. Well, before we started this investigation for the requirements, we didn't know that Jim was that expert. So allowing our own network of folks that are in that stakeholder group to point us in the right direction, and being able to easily include them and get them up to speed with the existing decisions that have happened can be streamlined if you're using a central place to do that collaboration.
Great. We had a couple of questions come in about our product and how it supports requirements traceability. The main question was, does it support requirements traceability from a high-level user and stakeholder requirements down to a low-level function or non-functional requirements and back? We also had a similar question that was, does the tool provide functionality to map or trace requirements to software development products?
Got it. Sure. So traceability is a key in being able to do impact analysis, to understand how you're doing from a coverage perspective, whether it's test case coverage, use case coverage, business requirements from a fleshing out of the definition of those requirements. So being able to trace those requirements from the high level, even starting at ideation or ideas or feature requests that may flow into one project, and being able to trace those down through the actual execution through business requirements or use cases or user stories or perhaps functional requirements, themes, epics, etc. Within JAMA, those relationships and those hierarchies of your requirements process can be configured so that you know that from a business requirement we expect to have a use case, and from a use case we expect to have a functional requirement. And those trace relationships from the top down or working from the bottom up to understand, let's say, a defect that was filed, which requirements or which features or which business requirements does that particular defect impact, we can run upstream or downstream impact analysis that's there. As far as connecting those, let's say, user stories or functional requirements into the development environment, things like Git or SVN or things of that nature, if I was understanding the question correctly. At this point, that's something that we leverage our integrations for, things like Jira or Microsoft TFS, as a way to leverage their capabilities in getting to the source code or the real development work that's being done there. So JAMA's focusing more on the higher level business end of the requirement space. Again, why we're building what we're building, ensuring that what we're building is what our stakeholders want, and getting proof or sign-off and approval that that's the right way to go for the requirements. But at this point, we don't connect into those development systems for tracking the source code.
We've had quite a few product questions, but do you just want to quickly touch on some of the integrations that we had? We had one person particularly ask about TFS.
Sure. Yeah. Microsoft TFS, Jira, Rally, HP Quality Center, and our product team is actually actively working on improving and updating some additional integrations. Not something that I can share explicit details on at this point. The integrations for JAMA is a key strategy and where we're going to continue to focus in putting our development efforts now and in the future. We recognize that having a best-of-breed tool for product delivery, which includes the requirements management, the testing and validation, and of course all the conversations that are happening along with defining those requirements and ensuring we're getting things right, we then need to pass off those requirements to a more development-focused tool where they are managing their sprints and their tasks and their time tracking and estimates, etc. And that's just something that, for us, an integration strategy is paramount for. So those are the ones we support with out of the box. And of course, leveraging our web services gives us capabilities to have custom integrations to other tools that teams may be using and being successful with today.
Great. I think that answers that question. We are getting close to the top of the hour, so we're going to have time for about one more question. I know that there were some other questions that popped up that we didn't have time to answer, but we will be sure to follow up with you after the webinar and make sure you did get an answer to your question if we were not able to cover it during the Q&A. This question relates back to quite a few of the challenges that you were discussing, and in the product you showed a screenshot of collaboration and flagging things as decision needed. And so somebody asked, is it possible to filter on whether a decision hasn't been made on an item? Like, how do you keep track of that information in the tool? Like, in comparison, I mean, we kind of talked about email and how it's hard to find that kind of information. Like, what are the benefits of working in the tool to find those open items or when a decision's made?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And to the point of having purposeful collaboration, for us, that's really about being able to categorize the types of conversations that we're having. When we're in email and we're asking someone a question, whether it's a stakeholder or a downstream subject matter expert, et cetera, to the email client, it's just an email, right? But when we're working within JAMA, being able to flag something or categorize it or request a decision, ask a question, raise an issue, and on the flip side, being able to answer that question, make a decision, or resolve an issue allows us to then filter on those conversations. So if we know that we're looking for a particular decision that was made by our, let's say, VP of sales, that gives us a way to quickly filter down on that type of conversation, as opposed to trying to search just a general, looking at all the comments, it becomes a little bit more difficult. So streamlining that process, the first way to do that is by categorizing or allowing folks to categorize and raise the different types of collaboration that's in there, and then of course they're going to be filterable. And you can save those filters. Being able to set up a filter for me personally would be looking for all of the open questions from our sales team about our product, and I track that as an open filter that I have in JAMA.
Great. With that, Ben, I think we'll hand it over to you to wrap it up. Thanks, Will.
Okay, well, thank you, Will. Thank you, Ashley, for a very informative presentation. Thank you to everyone for attending today's Modern Analyst webinar. I wanted to point out that the webinar, along with the slides, will be archived at ModernAnalyst.com within a few days. This concludes today's event, and we hope you have a great day.